Hi, my name is Dr. Nirmal Joshi. I'm an internal medicine and infectious disease physician with a strong interest in health and wellness.
And I am Disha Joshi, his daughter. I'm a consulting psychologist bringing psychological principles to the workplace through executive coaching and selection assessment work.
At a time when the COVID-19 pandemic has caused such unprecedented loss of human life, helplessness and despair, it is so important that we're internally resilient. Together, we're hoping to provide you with tools that we hope will help you think positively and be optimistic, despite almost anything that may happen around you.
This does not mean that you will magically feel better all the time. It does mean, though, that you will be equipped with possible thoughts and actions that will allow you to manage your emotions that much better.
It will mean essentially lowering the volume, if you will, of emotions such as helplessness, anxiety, depression, uncertainty, and loneliness.
And increasing the volume of emotions such as feeling hopeful, calm, in control, optimistic, and at peace with your inner self.
Together, we will walk you through a 12-step approach to reaching this goal.
4 things to know.
And 8 things to do.
4 things to know. 1. Understanding emotions. Why do I feel the way I feel? Number 2. Understanding the state of anxiety. Number 3. Understanding that I have a choice and some control over how I feel. And finally, number 4, with this choice and a few tools in hand, how can I harvest the good and effectively process the bad and everything in between?
We will build on this foundation to provide you with 8 concrete actions or things to do that are listed here.
Before we start, don't forget to check out the list of references in the document link below, and don't forget to click the like button.
First things first, let's understand why we feel the way we feel. The biology of emotions. When something happens outside of us, it causes a stimulus to our brain and our body responds with a reaction. If it is an unpleasant or threatening event, it results in a reaction of stress or fear. A happy event, such as a birthday or promotion, results in happiness, and the presence of an attractive individual causes the feeling of attraction or love. When these emotions have been scientifically studied, it is found that each one of them causes the release of specific chemicals called hormones that in turn make us feel the way we feel. So stress, for example, causes the release of stress hormones such as epinephrine and corticosteroids that result in an increased heart rate, blood pressure, and maybe blood sugars. When stress lasts for a long time, these effects can indeed become permanent. A happy event, on the other hand, causes the release of dopamine and serotonin, the happiness hormones. So you can see how closely the body and the mind are connected. What happens outside of us affects the mind, which is sort of the backstage director that determines what happens to the body, which is the onstage actor.
So let's talk about the onstage actor, better known as our body. So what happens to us when our body reacts to a crisis? And by crisis, it could be any type of crisis. An argument with a loved one, frustration with employees, coming home to an empty house, something someone said. For me, my body reacts with headaches, trouble sleeping, that feeling in the pit of my stomach. And in general, we might sweat, have muscle tension, and mentally we sometimes can even fuel some of our body's reactions by kind of asking ourselves, what if, what if, what if? So what do we commonly refer to all these things as? Well, anxiety. But when I say anxiety, it's not a word that has you smiling, is it? It sort of prompts a negative reaction. Anxiety in the modern world has become a stigma, a negative thing. But here's the deal. We all have anxiety. From a scientific and evolutionary perspective, we need it to survive. So at its most basic level, it's our physiological response to a threatening stimulus. Back when we had to protect ourselves against lions and bears, we needed our body to kick in to tell us to fight, flee, freeze, whatever we needed to do to keep ourselves safe in the moment. So why do some people have more of a body reaction than others? We all adapt in different ways. Based on our ancestors, we end up kind of with a cocktail of genetics plus our current experiences that determine our responses now. For example, my ancestors were alive during the India-Pakistan partition riots, and their families were frequently on the run to protect themselves. So they may have needed higher levels of anxiety or physiological responses, really, to survive on a day-to-day basis. And they might have passed that on downwards all the way to me. But now I'm not necessarily fleeing from a riot, yet that same reaction is triggered when I feel out of control. And that kind of leaves me maybe feeling depressed, stuck, nowhere to go. So what was once adaptable is now not. Obviously, COVID-19 is a global pandemic and brings up rational fear. But normalizing this fear, accepting our emotions, and understanding where we lie can help us to move forward in calming our bodies and finding ways to manage and change our physiological states to help us cope better and just feel better overall.
So now that you have a better understanding on why we feel the way we feel, the next thing to understand is that much of what we feel is determined by our very own mind. In other words, despite what happens outside us, a happy event or a sad event, we have the ability to process it internally in a way that we personally choose. That is exactly why some individuals can stay calm in a crisis and others can decompensate. More on this a bit later.
A few examples to illustrate the idea that we have more control than we think. Many studies have been done on Tibetan monks and their brainwave patterns using an fMRI brain scan. Tibetan monks can actually spend long periods of time in a relaxed, calm body state, lowering their heart rate from what's normal, about 60 to 100, to 40 to 45. Interestingly, researchers found that during this state, there are actually bursts of electrical activity in the brain that link all of our brain centers together in harmony, gamma waves. And these gamma waves produced heightened empathy, compassion, laser-like focus. And the monks can enter and leave the state at will. And so even some research even says that beginner level meditators can show an increase in this positive brain wave activity. So you really don't have to become a monk to feel some of these effects. A specific instrument to help us with almost practicing these states a little more is biofeedback. So biofeedback is exactly what it sounds like. Bio plus feedback, getting feedback from our biology. How, you might ask? So this is basically based on certain technology and specific programs where they actually have sensors that connect from your body to a computer or a smartphone. And some of you might have already seen this on your smartwatches or Fitbits. They actually give you cues when your heart rate is high, and then you do something differently to change your response. Over time, you get better at that, like kind of listening to the technology to help inform your response. And then you get better at being the driver of your brain bus.
So other evidence of being able to be the driver of your own brain bus comes from studies of happiness and the human mind. In 1978, researchers at the Northwestern University and the University of Massachusetts evaluated levels of happiness in two groups of individuals. One who had just won the lottery, and two who had suffered catastrophic accidents and left with paraplegia or paralysis of their legs. As expected, soon after the event, they were predictably happy or sad. However, after several months, the lottery winners were not as happy as baseline, and the paraplegics were indeed not as sad, almost at the same mood level. So what does this study show? One, that the human body has this amazing ability to manufacture or create happiness. Two, this phenomenon that behavioral scientists have called hedonic adaptation, sort of this internal thermostat that returns the body to a baseline state of happiness despite a happy or a sad event that caused those emotions to fluctuate.
Have you ever found that the first bite of something is tastier than the second or the third? Like that first bite of chocolate ice cream, that's what it is for me. But that's hedonic adaptation in a nutshell. A relevant illustration of this today is what we call the paradox of wealth. So stemming from an economic principle by Easterlin, the idea is that there's only a limited relationship between wealth and happiness. To a certain extent, money makes us happy in that it provides us our bare necessities. But afterwards, more wealth doesn't really always indicate more satisfaction.
Just like the false notion that more money can buy more happiness, is the false notion that more choices will make us happier. We now have countless choices in buying, whether it be the types of bread, butters, jams, or sauces, or the types of cars that we buy and the types of options within them. It is now well known that too many choices paradoxically often cause us to be dissatisfied rather than satisfied with our purchase, with the notion that maybe we should have bought a different option. My first car purchase, our family ambassador car in India, with a standard set of options, gave me more joy, I remember, than my shiny new purchase with seemingly limitless options. So more money or more choices do not really bring lasting happiness. The exact opposite situation is when we are stuck with no or limited choices.
Yes, stuck. COVID has cornered us in exactly that kind of a position. We are truly stuck, and more literally than figuratively as well, with limited options. So this is a time when our bodies are capable of making that more synthetic happiness. And synthetic happiness, again, is what we generate when we may not get what we want, while still accepting our emotions around it. So very similar to the paraplegic in the previous study. Here's another example of people in Italy doing exactly that. As you can see, these people have kind of created something out of nothing and created togetherness out of isolation.
So by now, we hope that we have demonstrated to you that external factors do not always bring happiness, and even if they do, the happiness may indeed be short-lived.
And also that the body has this remarkable ability to generate happiness and contentment.
So isn't it tremendously empowering to know that you have a choice in how you feel? This hidden power inside you that you can unleash.
And that's the fourth thing that we want you to know.
Knowing that you have control sets the stage for several possible actions. In general terms, when good comes our way, how do we harvest that good? And if bad were to come our way, how do we process it to feel somewhat better?
So the next part of our talk is to provide you several possible things that you can do, and literally tomorrow morning, as in essentially a toolbox of actions, if you will.